To start with this call, I'm going to show our antitrust policy notice. We show this at the beginning of every meeting of Linux Foundation workgroups. We do this to ensure that everyone knows the rules under which we collaborate and to make sure that everyone is comfortable with speaking freely about what they're doing. Moving on. Our agenda today is pretty straightforward. We have a new fixed agenda for the monthly meetings, and that agenda is introductions, spec news, SBOM news, OSPO news, automation news, and then we do work on standards or reference material, how we support other projects. We have any other business, and we have a close of meeting. Now, rather than go through anything too in-depth with introductions, I'm just going to make a note of who I see on this call this time. So I see we've got Nathan, we've got SC, and we've got Fang on this call today. We have a few people dropping in and out at different times, and we also have Jim on the line. We expect other people to dial in as we go. There's no limit to who can access the call. Oh, I see we're joined by Kyunye from LG. Hey, Kyunye. Let's jump right into our specification news. We have quite a lot. First of all, the OpenChain project has formally released its security assurance specification. This is something that we completed in March of this year, and in September, our governing board voted to introduce it into the ISO IEC JTC1 pass transposition process to become an ISO IEC standard. This security assurance reference specification is something that helps companies around the world improve their approach to open source and security. The document, just like our previous work around license compliance standardization, is simple and short. It's a very clear document of about 7 pages that describes how to create a high-quality security assurance program. We started editing this last year. We completed it, as I said, in March, and it is available as a de facto industry standard today. It will be available as an ISO standard around mid-2023. You can get the latest version, specifically the variant that's going into the ISO process, on our website. We made sure that the version being prepped for final submission was uploaded in October. And you can access it on GitHub in Markdown, which allows you to look at the format of it very easily and to essentially carry that information anywhere you need. Now, to support this specification and our previous specification for license compliance, we, of course, have front of mind self-certification. Our self-certification material has long been available to support ISO IEC 5230, our international standard for license compliance. But until recently, the self-certification material was available only in a PDF and on a web app. We've changed that and made it available under Markdown. So essentially, it's available in a format that is really easy to use and can be translated into anything from PDF to Word documents, etc. Our self-certification checklist is available on GitHub and can be used today to self-certify you to ISO IEC 5230. How does this relate to the security assurance reference specification? It relates directly. We were able to take what we've done for license compliance and very quickly adjust it into a self-certification checklist for our security assurance spec. And almost immediately, our good friends at CAICT provided a simplified Chinese translation of that. This means that we have self-certification for license compliance and self-certification for security assurance available today. You can expect us to be providing more and more translations of the self-certification checklists and questionnaires in the weeks and months ahead to help companies adopt either standard in a super quick, easy way. And for those of you who are new to our calls, you're reminded that self-certification is our recommended way to get started with both of these standards. It allows you to begin your program, have high quality, either license compliance or security assurance programs in place, to know your processes are solid and to build out from there. We have some news from SBOM land. The SPDX project is looking for supporters. By that, they're interested in people using SPDX or contributing to the project. They want to list them on the website. There's no cost involved to do that, and you're very welcome to head over to their website, get yourself listed, and there will be great thanks from the community there to show momentum for ISO 5962, the ISO standard for software bill of materials for the OpenChain project and also other projects around the world. Now, SPDX is not the only software bill of materials that you can use for monitoring your supply chain. Standards such as SWID have been used, and de facto standards such as Cyclone DX are used as well. But SPDX is close to our heart because it is probably the software bill of materials used by the vast majority of our global community. We have some OSPO news. Over in Sweden, there is an OSPO event taking place on the 19th and 20th of October. This event is open to all, and you will be able to participate in person if you happen to be in Sweden. Our good friends at Ericsson are hosting this event. They have been connected to our project for a long time, and they have been supporting us in our governing board, and they have also been supporting other projects around the world. The OSPology Live event sees To-Do Group, OpenSSF, OpenChain, SPDX, and Chaos projects working together to talk about everything from process management to the very practical matters of scanning packages for security. And our purpose is to give a community forum with plenty of participants from Sweden and elsewhere a chance to share notes on what's happening in the market. Now, automation news. The biggest automation news is that our reference tooling work group has a new meeting schedule. As usual, they're meeting bi-weekly, so it's one of the most active work groups in the world. This is something that you are very much encouraged to participate in if you have any interest in automation and tooling for either license compliance or security, or indeed export control. More on export control in a minute. Other news, we have a bit. We've been busy in the last few weeks improving our workgroup activities. We have a new monthly call schedule. We're on the call targeted towards the US and Asia right now. We have a call on first Tuesdays targeted towards US and Europe. We have a proposed new workgroup structure as well. Because our community is so big around the world, we want to try and make it clear how it's possible to engage with us, how it's possible to collaborate with us when you want to work with one part of our project or the other, and where to find information more easily. Starting later this week, we'll begin transitioning to this format to allow you to find your way around nice and easily. You'll see that we will continue to have most of the existing work groups, but a few nuanced things will happen to allow us to reflect things like the fact we now maintain 2 standards for managing the supply chain. Our specification work group will split into a security work group and a licensing work group. One will deal with our licensing spec and the other will deal with our security spec. Our education work group and our onboarding work groups have merged, and we are doing our very first chair election around education, and we have a nominee, Nathan Kumagai, who's on the line today. He's been chairing the onboarding work group for quite a few years already, and now he is positioned to become the education work group chair as onboarding and education merge. Meanwhile, Balakrishna, previous education work group chair, is taking a break and moving himself into contributor mode. And great thanks to him for doing incredible work on things like our online training courses and things like transitioning us into easy to edit formats that allowed us to accomplish so much. More on that later. We're introducing 2 new work groups, export control, because that's a topic we'll talk about starting in November, and a policy work group for people from government and market management. We're also relaunching our US work group to join our China, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, India, Germany, and UK work groups. In the end, joining our main mailing list will have less traffic. You will join the individual work groups for information pertaining to their specific area, and the regional work groups for engaging with people in your local language or specific to your local market. Our main mailing list will be for general conversation and summaries of key activity. This will help reduce the burden of information in such a large and busy project. Now, speaking of busy, we've got a bunch of activities announced for, sorry, I should say Q4, bunch of activities announced for Q4. We have a new telco meeting schedule. They'll be talking monthly, and they'll have 2 calls for different time zones. Our automotive work group is having a large meeting in middle November, which will consolidate information about what happened this year and plan 2023. Our Japan work group is meeting at the end of this month, and our Germany work group is meeting in middle November. These work group meetings are basically a regular cadence of stuff, just like our tooling work group, and they're well worth attending if you have interest in specific industries or you want to find out what your peers are doing in a certain region. We've had some interesting events. We just finished an event in China with CAICT, an organization under the Ministry of Trade, where OpenAtom, ourselves, and others collaborated to explain how open source is working in the industry today. And of course, in another area of our project, we've been busy doing things like expanding our partner program. So there's more law firms and so on that can help people with our license compliance or our security standards as companies adopt them and put them into procurement discussions in the supply chain. Right, moving on from news. What type of work have we been doing around standards and core material? What work can we do now, today, and what can we do tomorrow? We mentioned this on the US-Europe monthly call about 2 weeks ago. The security assurance specification is out, and it's going into the ISO JTC1 pass transposition process. So the current standard, generation 1, is a de facto standard, and that will be an ISO IEC standard in mid-2023. Now, things aren't going to stand still. Security is a busy area. So we are immediately going to start work on our security assurance 2nd generation standard. We will aim to have that out as a de facto standard in 2023 and to have it as an update to our ISO standard in 2024. The specification is on GitHub, and you can leave issues on GitHub with suggestions for improvement. We actually have had a bunch of interesting suggestions for generation 2 already. We had some great contributions from ISO Workgroup Subcommittee 27, focused on information technology security, suggesting that we tweak aspects of scope and so on. And this is also your chance to do the same. Because this is a relatively new industry standard, the specification originated in development last year, was completed in March of this year, and the market itself continually evolves with the high degree of investment on security. It's the perfect time to help us address future scope growth and improvements in the structure and requirements of our security assurance standard. We will begin this editing process this month. So that's right, we're submitting generation 1 into ISO this month, and we're going to be working on this process this month, working on generation 2 straight away. The same thing is happening for license compliance. We're going to be working on the license compliance spec now, starting in October, and we're going to be aiming to have an update to the de facto version of the spec around 2024, and then we'll update the ISO version of the spec in that year or the year after. Just like security assurance, the current version of the spec is on GitHub, and you can open issues and look at existing issues with suggestions for improvement there as well. The editing on security insurance and the editing on license compliance will take place on these monthly calls. So just like the education work group, which will be developing reference material, we will be working on the specifications on these calls moving forward. You can expect the calls on the first Tuesday and the third Tuesday of November. First Tuesday is US Europe. Third Tuesday is US Asia. You can expect those calls to be where we are actively adding issues and reviewing issues about updating the security specification and the license compliance specification. So it's very important to make those calls. Now, as well as that, of course, we have reference material to support the specs. And I mentioned education will be pretty busy on these calls. Let me explain what they'll be busy around. First of all, there's been a huge amount of work to make it easier to create and update reference material for the OpenChain project. Our education work group, led by Balakrishna, has done something to help convert key parts of our reference library to Markdown and create a process for using Markdown. What that means in essence is that we have a format for text that's easy to turn into PDFs or Word documents or PowerPoint, but it's very easy to edit the base version, the origin version, collaboratively online using GitHub. An example is that we were able to take our self-certification material, put it into our reference library, and edit it quickly. In fact, we could edit it so quickly that we were able to produce self-certification material updated for our license compliance spec, but also for our security assurance specification, and of course, at the same time as that, to have it translated almost immediately. Now, when it comes to other releases, we've made some great progress around playbooks, one of our most frequently requested updates. We released a small company playbook just a couple of weeks ago. The small company playbook is a significant advance on our previous playbooks. It has refined language and refined approaches. It is actually suitable for companies of all sizes. That said, our previous playbook targeted at medium companies has a few nuanced differences. It has a slightly larger process outlined in the playbook. We're going to take the best of the small company playbook, merge it with the previous version of the medium company playbook to have a refreshed medium company playbook. And we will do the same to create a large company playbook. I mentioned that our education work group will be working on the reference material on these calls. You can expect things like that to be done live on these calls. And it's the ideal place for you to contribute to. You can track what we're doing in education and reference on GitHub. Everything is under our GitHub repository reference material, and everyone is welcome to go there, take the material at CC0, do what they want with it, and of course, contribute material as well. Key thing for us will be doing things like getting those playbooks out, getting our existing older material refreshed, and using our new ability to translate or adjust material at higher speed to try to support people as comprehensively as possible, especially around the new security assurance specification. Now, there's also work to support other projects underway. The thing I wanted to flag was one event. There's an Open Compliance Summit, December 7th and 8th in Yokohama, Japan. Previously, this event focused on license compliance mostly. This event is this year going to be looking at license compliance, security compliance, and export control compliance. So the event is going to have an increased scope. And on day 2 of the event, we'll also host OpenChain To-Do Group and SPDX mini summits adjacent. Highly recommended that you go to this event and participate in it. Moving on to the any other business of this call, I'm going to turn it over and allow people to ask questions and so on in a minute. but I just wanted to flag that the project, as well as releasing material and specifications, has been working on how to help our work groups and individuals describe the project and do things like have slide decks such as this for their meetings. The most useful thing that has happened in the very recent period is that we have our new meeting and presentation slide template to assist you. This is just like everything else in our project, available with no restrictions at all, and it's designed to allow you to take it, have a meeting, and have it look just like all the others in the OpenChain project. Pretty good, we hope. Right. Pausing there and double checking if anyone else has any comments or questions they'd like to add. Due to the spam attack we had a minute ago, I have restricted people's ability to unmute themselves or share their screens, etc. So if you do have something to say, I'd ask that you have a look at the chat and put it in there, and we'll address it. And I'll unmute you, of course, to talk about it as well. Just pausing there so people have time to go and look at the chat. So if there is no other business today, I would like to thank you. This particular meeting today has been essentially an information dump. This is a meeting that is designed for the US and Asia, and moving forward, it will be actively editing our license compliance spec, our security assurance spec, and actively editing reference material from playbooks to training slides to checklists and so on. So this call will be very interactive in November, and you can expect people like Chris, our contributor to security assurance, who's done so much to brainstorm it to help us discuss future scope. You can expect Nathan to help think about not just the reference material repository, but how education on our website can be improved. You can expect people like Steve Kilbane, who's helped a lot around our specs, to discuss what happens next in license compliance. And we expect you to do the same. As we write the updated license compliance spec, we'll update an ISO standard. As we write the new security assurance spec generation 2, again, it'll affect a future ISO standard. And the reference material we're making now and improving now is going to help so many more companies do so much more with open source. Jacob just made a note that he's looking forward to the meetings being interactive, and he likes the new Markdown format. Thank you, Jacob. And I must say, we had remarkable success with the fact that it took, well, I've released 3 days after the English version of our security assurance self-certification checklist. I released the Chinese version. I actually got it 18 hours after the English version was released. And that's the power of Markdown. It's basically a text document. People take it, they improve it, they translate it, and they send it back, and off we go. Okay, everyone, we've hit the half-hour mark. My apologies that the meeting was disrupted at the beginning. I will be re-recording that segment for the long-term view of this. It is always very challenging when we have a trawl issue in a call, and it is very disturbing for all parties involved. We're going to look at how we prevent people who happen to have fake Zoom accounts being able to access our calls, and we'll try to improve our countermeasures on that front. That said, we do want to ensure that we support access for everyone around the world, not just people who are already part of the OpenChain project, not just people who are part of the Linux Foundation, but everyone who wants to turn up and contribute. What we're doing here with these ISO standards, what we're doing here with this reference material is trying to create a way that people can have processes to manage open source, no matter where they are, what language they speak, what company they work for or don't, and what markets they participate in. So thank you for your support in doing that. And finally, one last piece of news. I see that SZ has said he's translating the traditional Chinese version of the security spec. SZ, that's fantastic. While our good friends over in mainland China may have produced the first security assurance self-certification checklist, it looks like you might produce the first security assurance specification translation itself, countering quite neatly traditional Chinese ahead of the simplified Chinese version. We do like to see that competitiveness. And for those of you who are joining us from Korea, there you go. It's your turn to do something quickly too. With that, we shall end. Thank you again. I will send the slides to our main mailing list so everyone has access to them. And you'll have all of the links that you were shown on this call today. Take care. I'll see you next month for live editing, and I do appreciate your time.